Are you tired of the same old baseball showcase you've come to know? It's time for a new experience. The Top 100 Experience, a high-powered multi-day event in a professional setting showcasing your skills and talents at AAA ballparks. This is your chance to play at a professional stadium, learn from former MLB players, and compete in front of college coaches. This year was the first installment of their Stadium Series. The experience will be back at NBT Bank Stadium, home of the New York Mets AAA affiliate, and then the event heads to PNC Field in Scranton, Pennsylvania, home of the AAA New York Yankees. For more information or to register today, visit top100sports.com and click on the Top 100 Experience page, or click the link in the description of this video.
But I know a big number. You're one of the 50th most interesting athletes on with us today, bro. I don't know where you got that title, but we're going to get into that.
I don't know where I got it either. One of my kids saw it the other day, and they were like, how are you interesting? That's actually a good question.
It's life after
baseball.
Maybe
because I make wine? And they're like, yeah, that's not interesting.
Well, I think oh, yes.
That was interesting.
Got it.
There's another error right there. That's going to make the show the most interesting one yet.
Right?
Yeah, we apologize for anyone who gets like seasick or motion sickness. Hopefully they didn't. That wasn't the end all be all for them.
There we go again.
Hey man, listen, if you want a new laptop, we'll go to send you
a
gift for showing on the show.
I told you.
It's a good thing you got some of that big league cheese. You got a pension. You can get a new computer after coming on with us today.
Let's set the over-under right now. How many more times does the camera slip? I'm going to go, I'll set it at 2.5. Over-under, what do we think?
It stood for about 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden start recording. Shit hits the fan.
Of course.
You got to lick the suction cup, I think, on the back. You got to lick the cup.
That's always how it goes. Well, like I was saying when we had some of those technical difficulties earlier on, it's always fun because I get to talk to a former number 1 overall pick in Grilli every week when we do this show. But today I get two of them today. Joe Blanton joining the show, 13-year Major League veteran, World Series champion. Joe, thank you so much for braving the camera and coming on the show to join us here today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'm usually out in the fields, staying away from technology.
I was going to say, we got you out of the sunlight there, right? We got you out of the vineyard, man. But thanks for joining us. I know last time I was out there, saw you in person. It's usually at a Guy Fieri function. I haven't been out to a couple. I don't know if I'm still on the list or if I'm
name drop.
Next off of it, I haven't been. He's a former guest.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, friend of the program.
He's been on the show. And it's good to see you, man. But even across the way. But this guy, man, I'm jealous. You got one thing I don't, besides a vineyard, because I'm into wine too, as you know. You got that World Series ring, man. You're one of the lucky ones that graced that. I got a second place ring, but
yeah.
You know, Phillies are legendary that way. You're probably big in
they are.
Every time you
what a run that was. I got traded over halfway through, so I wasn't even there start to finish.
Oh.
But still, what a run, right? That's what we play for. Once you win that first one, you want to win the rest of them. Never satisfied.
I mean, it's such a good place to start with you in your career, especially because that Phillies team, especially that pitching rotation, was kind of, I mean, it's one of the more legendary. Yeah, I mean, it's about as good as it gets. But can you talk a little bit? I mean, I'm sure there's so much that you could say about that team and that rotation and the guys that you pitched with, the guys that you played with. But can you talk a little bit about that team and maybe that rotation in particular and what made it so special and what was the best part about it for you being able to maybe pitch with those guys, learn from them? What was that like?
Oh, I mean, so I was there 8 to 12, and we won in 08. And when I think back about the years, that team, I mean, obviously a great team who won the World Series, probably the least talented team from 8 to 12.
Wow.
I mean, if you think about, you could just think about the starting rotation of '08 was in the playoffs was we started with Cole, started with Hamels, we went to Brett Myers, Jamie Moyer, and myself. Fast forward 3 years, the first 4 is Roy Halladay, Cliff Lee, Roy Oswalt, and Cole. Cole Hamels moves to number 4. But we didn't win that year. That just shows you how hard it is to win.
Yeah.
You know, we had a year we won 103 games or something and got bumped first round. It just doesn't work. But those teams that win have something special, right? It's it is. I don't know.
So that being said, you played on the Dodger Blue. You wore Dodger Blue for a little bit, yeah?
Yep, 2 different times, 12 and 16.
Yeah, so being a former Dodger, right? That's a good thing about playing for a lot of teams. You can sit there and have your pick of who you want to root for and be a bandwagon fan after you play, especially when you wear the jersey. But how you feeling about the Dodgers, man? They're the dream team, talked about, powerhouse. What's going on over there, man?
Right? That's incredible. What's the most impressive to me? I mean, looking obviously how smart they were in deferring all the money but those guys like wanting that to happen to, like Shohei, that's deferring a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money you could have invested right away if you're talking about money and that's building on top, that he's willing to, you know what, put that aside. I would rather get that later, have a good team around me, and win championship after championship. I think that says something about a player right there.
Absolutely. Well, like you said, it's hard to win, even when you have, on paper, going through the off season. There's a lot to talk about, but not enough, right? Because it's all this potential talk: who's going to win, who you think's going to win, who you're going to bet on. Right now, just based upon transactions and the amount of conversation surrounding them, the Dodgers won the World Series. In the next at least 3 out of the next 10 years, maybe, right? That's what I've been saying. But it does, like you just said, to your point, you won in '08 with at least a talented team. So what does that say about the heart or the character of the team or the chemistry, that the difference, right? There's always a little bit of tangibles that people don't like to really talk about, but there's stuff there.
Yeah, and over that 7 months, counting the playoffs, you have your ebbs and flows, right? You might have a great month, you might have a bad month. If your bad month's in October, too bad. Or injuries happen at the wrong time. Somebody gets hurt in September. Sorry, now you don't have your number 1 guy or your best bat in the lineup. It just happens that way. And that's what makes it so hard, I think, is just you gotta live through 162. Now you gotta play last month. Everybody starts 0-0. It doesn't matter.
How? Because I mean, both of you guys can answer this question because you both have a ton of playoff experience. But when you, like you said, you have to make it through that 162 game grind, and you don't have to play in the major leagues to guess that everybody's tired and hurting at the end of that year. What is it that, or I guess what makes the good teams able to kind of strap it together for a couple more games to be able to reach that ultimate goal? Is there something that either of you have seen in your time playing that made that, transition to the postseason easier or harder? What does that look like?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think if I had the answer for it, I wouldn't be out here making wine. I'd be making a lot of money in a front office somewhere if I had that answer. The Dodgers would have hired me on to be like, hey, how are we going to win the next 5 World Series with all this contract money we have in? But at the end, it's just what we said. It's a combination, being healthy at the right time, which, girls, from when we played, you were expected to strap it on every day and go out, where now it's a lot of that, kind of like the NBA's doing. Oh, you know what? Take a little bit more time off. It's about winning the World Series, not just getting to the playoffs now. So teams are really changing how that's structured to try to be healthy in October, not necessarily just getting through the season, because with a couple extra wild cards now, that makes it different. You can win a few less games, get in. The wild card teams seem to do really well without those days off, and they seem to push through the added games of your number 1's not lined up. Maybe it's a number 3. A lot of these teams 1 through 3 now, it's some of them they're getting the playoffs. It's like they have 3 number 1's. it's not like they're really getting pushed back all that much. So
It's a good point.
what is that? I don't know. It's what we talk about, that team chemistry. Some teams just have it, whatever it is. Again, if I knew what it was, I'd be in the front office somewhere.
Well, you know a little bit about mixtures, and you mentioned it a few times, and obviously we're going to get into it. I brought a glass just because I thought it was appropriate.
Oh, look at you. All right.
I figured, hey, why not? It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I know it's not out by
Right.
you yet, but no, man, it's amazing. I read this, don't know the backstory and reread it and keep learning more about you. Again, you compete against guys. Of conversations I've had with former teammates, what life after baseball becomes, what you transition into, your name, image, and likeness. You're still trying to use it in a good way. This little pedestal of, hey, I'm successful, I'm driven as a former athlete, and your drive and passion, it kind of led you to the grapes over there in Napa Valley, and that's what you're doing full time. Because I know that's not an easy job, man. You got went from 162 to 365, bro.
Exactly. There's a little downtime. We just had that, so it's hopping back on the train now. But there's always a little bit of lull in the game. But yeah, it's getting ready to start ramping up again. But it's funny that the wine season, if you will, almost mirrors the baseball season. That you kind of hit that like November time. Harvest is usually in. It hits barrel. You're kind of sitting there, waiting. There's the holidays hit, and it's so travels and sales and all that kind of slow down. So you're really from like your November to January is a really slow, and then you start hitting that like February, March. You got bud break starts happening. Bloom. Now grapes are going. Starting to travel a little bit more. The weather's getting nicer. Then you hit that, and then you got playoff time, right? Playoff time's in the fall. Same here. You got that September, October time when harvest is going. That's playoff time. That's the time we shoot for, when everything needs to get tidied up in a nice little bow and hopefully come out great.
So instead of practicing, the testing phase would be practice, right? You have to test it. There's a lot of testing.
That's the best way. You know what? That's the thing that I've learned. You learn by drinking, is what they say. So
there you go. Cheers to that.
That's
man.
not a bad day job.
not a bad job.
So it's interesting. It's a good conversation for the off season because, kind of like Grilli said, there's stuff going on, but it's kind of hard to, it's hard to talk about it every day and every week because, a lot of it is the same thing mulling over again, and kind of like you said, just trying to predict anything and everything. But, trying to Grilli talks about this all the time, keeping the jersey on your back for as long as possible. But once, you can't wear that jersey anymore, being able to find other things that you're passionate about after baseball and life after baseball. What was it that drew you to wine that was the passion for you? Or if it's not, or maybe just a hobby or whatever it might be, but what was it about that kind of made it? Is it because it lines up with the baseball season? Was that the main draw?
No, I think, to start off, I think what Grill said, it's make them rip the uniform off. We hear that all the time coming through,
Absolutely.
But then after you've been out of the game a few years, you really understand why. You hit that point of like, the first year kind of feels like, this is a little vacation, right? I don't have to work out. I don't have to pack up a suitcase and go anywhere. This is nice. And that second and third year, you're like, oh, wait, I'm really done. Like, this is it. And I actually do a little stuff now with the Players Association where trying to help guys like kind of evolve and like, what do they do now? That's the first thing I tell guys, because there's a lot of guys there that they're, they're like early 30s, they're struggling, AAA, big leagues, back and forth. They're like, maybe it's time to move on with my life. I'm like, no, keep that uniform on. I was like, don't leave yet. I was like, leave when they'll let you know. Don't leave yourself. But as far as wine goes, it started through playing with me, actually, traveling with the guys, get to bring our own drinks on the plane, right? Hang out with the fellas.
There you go.
I was the guy that had a 12-pack roller bag of wine after a couple years in. Like after I started getting into wine and traveling to Napa and learning about it, I was like, you know what? Let me roller bag it up. And I started bringing like nice stemware on the plane. That didn't last very long with after like a 5-hour flight and a bunch of guys going through a case of wine, they would get broke. So I was going to plastic Govinos after that, learn my lesson. But I get a group of guys. It started off 2, 3 guys, 4, 5. Next thing you know, sometimes I'd have 12 guys, and we'd be back there drinking wine. And, just kind of that bond you get while you're, connecting, drinking. I think that was what kind of led in it for me is that. And then obviously Napa's a beautiful place, being able to be here among the vines and just that different changes of, one of my favorite times was just a couple months ago when everything starts fermenting. You can smell it in the air here. You can smell the grapes just being made. It has that almost like a grappa smell to it, that stems and seeds and skins fermenting, and it's just
Well,
it's
dude,
an incredible thing.
I don't know if it's good, the good lens or the light or whatever kept falling in the beginning of the show, but your skin looks amazing from here, and it's got to be something in the grapes, bro. It's got to be. They say it's good for the heart, but man, you're 40 what?
43.
Okay, well I'm 47. I need to get out there and get a little bit more than grapes.
It's the resveratrol, I think is what it's called, right? It's supposed to be good for the skins.
That's good, man.
So,
no, you look good, man, and you're in, you stay in shape, but at least we try, anyways, right? I'm trying here.
Yeah.
Battle it.
Or I joke that I'm just I drink so much wine that I'm pickled now. One of the two.
That's right.
I love that. That's hilarious.
I told you, when you have a mound visit, dude, you just never know what's going to come out, bro. It's
Yeah. Well, speaking of the mound, just to cycle back to baseball, because I'm always curious to ask, especially people who played kind of during this iteration of the Oakland Athletics. That was the first team that you came up with, and you were there for some successful years with the A's, and kind of like that. You could kind of call it the tail end of the entire Moneyball craze, that whole thing. But can you talk a little bit about your time with the Oakland A's? Because obviously they've been in the news a lot recently with the decision to move the team to Vegas in a few years. But I'd be curious to know about your time with the team, and then kind of to piggyback off of that, your thoughts on what has happened with the team and the vision for it moving forward.
Yeah, I think, God, if I think back about it, for me, I think for a lot of the guys that came up in that little time, it was actually a great team to get drafted by. Obviously, they're not putting any money into the big league team then or now, so they're relying on developing players. So very good coaches in the minor leagues, and you get drafted, you have that. You weren't getting drafted. I think the Dodgers are that way now, since we're talking about them, but the Yankees kind of back then, where you got drafted by that team, you were kind of just waiting for your trade date. I'm not moving out. You have to be the guy as a rookie to break that squad, right? So we all knew there was that incentive. Hey, I come in, I work hard, I keep my head down, I do my job. I'm going to make it up pretty quick. I can run through the system fairly quickly because they're cycling through guys. And then when you get there, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It's going from Oakland to Philly, 2 different markets.
Wow. Yeah.
Right.
Totally different.
Philly, and it's hey, we're here to win a World Series. Oakland's hey, we're developing. We're always developing.
Yeah, we hear that.
You kind of had that not hard media presence. It's you can kind of mess up a little bit if you say something wrong. It's kind of nobody really knows, and then the veteran guy go, hey, you might not want to handle it, but you do that in New York, Philly, one of those markets, that's going to be a little bit tougher. But also back in that day, it was hitting the newspaper, and that was about it.
Sure.
But and then being able to get traded into one of the other teams, you were kind of already ready for that. So it made that transition a little easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Getting drafted by them and being the Moneyball draft was interesting because those drafts aren't real popular in baseball, especially then. They were just they're just things that happen, and 3 years later, all of a sudden, somebody's in the big leagues. So it was kind of a more known thing where the book had came out. So that was interesting. Where are they going now? We'll see, right?
I know. It's crazy. Well, you bring up an interesting point with what you said, where the difference between that market in Oakland with the media presence. Was there kind of a moment when you moved on from Oakland, when you were traded to Philly, Was there kind of a welcome to the, because I know people talk about like your welcome to the big leagues moment, but was there like a welcome to the big market big leagues moment for you? And do you remember what that was, if there was one?
I remember a couple of things initially, exactly what you just said. I remember getting traded
Yeah.
over, and there were at least a handful of guys jokingly, "Hey, welcome to the big leagues." Right? I'm like, I must have been a little naive. I was like, "What do you mean? This was my fourth year." And they're like, "No, like out of Oakland." And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I get it
Yeah.
now." Then you get to that home club. Oakland was the only clubhouse I'd known. Not that much different than the
A little
visiting
different
clubhouse.
spread table, huh?
Little different spread table. You hit Philly, and that's the home, and you're like, "Oh, this is different."
There's actually no mold in the grout tiles of the showers, right?
Right? The sewer didn't overflow and make you move up to the football locker room.
Yeah. We talked. Jace Peterson, former A, got to the World Series with the Diamondback. Same thing. We couldn't have him on the show. He's not really technically inclined. You have an E column for him. We're giving him that grace. We're going to get him on the show because we're dying to talk to him about that very thing. There's a lot of people that don't realize, like, just because you're out of a race or you have nothing to play for, it's like, no, it becomes a little bit more individualized, right? In a sense that,
Yeah.
yeah, you want to sit there and play and win a game, but you're like, damn, if I keep producing, somebody might scoop me up and I might have a chance at a playoff run and get a World Series ring. And hence, we got a guy right here living proof of that. So,
Yeah. We had traded everybody away starting into that year, going into that year. Dan Herron and Rich Hart and Houston Street and Nick Swisher, everybody they were dumping, all of us, and kind of that we're all hitting that like 3 to 5 year range. So it's kind of like, we're starting all over again. Where the couple years before we had productive teams. They would bring guys. They brought Frank Thomas over in '06. I think he dropped like 39 homers that year, hitting like 270. He
right,
was
I
like
forgot
38 years old.
I forgot he came to Oakland for a little bit. That's right.
Yeah.
It's hard too because again, we talk about everybody's chasing the ring. There's different stages in. Hey, I want to be a first round pick. Then you want to get your big league debut. Then you want to, sign, play all year. Then you want to sign that multi-year contract. Then you want to win that ring. There's 5 stages to me, kind of that order, and some maybe not in particular, because if you come into a place where you're winning a ring first year, you're lucky, right?
Yeah.
Being in a
And you don't realize how lucky you are.
right, like if you're in a Derek Jeter situation, right? This guy walked right into amazing career and was also a key component of all those winning seasons. But the sad part, and he played for the same team his whole entire career. For us, I mean, I got as many jerseys as there are teams almost, and I didn't care. Like I said, rip it off me. But you just hope that you meet all these flying monkeys along the way. And I just talked to Mark Melanson the other day, and I said, hey, man.
The Shark. I played with Mark.
The
Love
Shark,
Mark.
right? Yeah. So he sent me this funny picture of us at Venice Beach. We were there where Arnold Schwarzenegger, the gym right in the middle of the beach there. And it was just funny how we looked and how we were acting. We're just trying to get out of the hotel room, see some freaks out there, and just laugh, have a few laughs, download from whatever we were going through. But you miss out on a lot of times with just the person, right? You're sitting there going like, I know this guy's a player. You try to do these things on the plane like you did the wine and stuff, but to take that whole completely vulnerable shell that you have to have with your alpha and your ego, and I got to do this because if I let it down, someone's taking my job. Do you really know the person? And I finding in my 7th year of retirement, it's fun to have guys like you back on the show or run into you like we did at the Guy Fieri softball deal with Tim McGraw and all that. And, to really just sit there and drink wine as people, to know Joe the person as Joe. I want to, he sucks. I want to eat him for breakfast kind of thing. You're across the diamond like that guy. I hate that guy. I want to kill him, because we're all fighting for the same thing,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you hit it perfectly. I mean, how many times you go out there, you're hurting, you don't feel good, you got nothing that day on the mound, you can't let anybody know. And you got to act like you're a badass out there every single time, regardless. Yeah. And you're right. You got to put on that like shell of like, this is, this is who I am and this is what I got to be. And then you get away and you're like, oh, that guy's not so bad.
Right, right. Yeah, I can't remember who it was. I went to one of the teams and someone's like, I hated you, man. And I'm sitting right next to his locker. Like, oh, really? I said, I didn't know that. Why'd you hate me so bad, man? You know, he's like, I hate you. It was like, but then we became friends. It was just a funny thing. It's just like you said. And I hate when you come up with teams like you were there in Oakland for 4 years, right? You start sitting there going like, oh, this is my rat pack, and this is who I'm going to come up with, and we're going to come up together. And, you know, it's like high school. We're going to go through high school together. We're going to go through summer college together. It's not like that in the big leagues necessarily until you find that niche of guys. You're like, okay, these are dudes that still will call me after life after baseball, you know. And I don't know, who's your flying monkeys? Who do you still jam with?
That's, you know what, that's one of the good things about where I live now is I get to see quite a few guys that will just, they'll, out of the blue, I'll get a text and be like, hey, I'm coming to Napa next week. Are you there? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Let's grab dinner. Come over to the house. Like whatever it is. I always try to tell guys, I'm like, why didn't you tell me you were coming? I was like, I can help you up. Yeah. I could set you up at places. I was like, this is what, we didn't want to bother you. I was like, that's kind of what I do now. It's
yeah, you wanted to bother you. So, bother me, man. Yeah. So here, we're getting it out of the show. Call Joe Blanton. You're going to California, Napa. Call him up, guy. Listen, he'll help your complexion. Put you in the right places. He'll help with your skin.
Put you in the right places to go drink wine. I can do that.
I love that. I got to ask, too.
But you're right. That's where the game, what you were just talking about, that clicked in my head just a minute ago, talking about, I feel like it's a little different now. I feel like I hate being that guy that's like, oh, the game's changed. But kind of when we came in, it was like, hey, you don't talk to the other team. You know, like you might give a little tap, but there is no like, you know, kind of banter, laughing back and forth, you know, like there is now. So we grew up in that, like, I didn't care if 29 other teams hated me, as long as the 24 other guys I was with loved me.
Yeah, well, I was fine with it. Just like who was it? I just saw a clip, and Harold Reynolds was interviewing the guy that bunted. They threw at him. He threw at him, drilled him, and then the next at bat he bunted. And then ran at the pitcher. I can't remember who it was now. It's just escaping me. I'm drawing a blank. But I said that was the game that we were, you know, you see the evolution of the game. Like now it's like, oh, hey, bro, you hit a 3-run tank off me yesterday. That was awesome. No, it wasn't. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm like, no, dude. I want to put my head under a pillow and hide. You know what I mean?
It's absolutely. It's something that Grilli and I talk about a lot, and especially just because, you know, the difference in the way the game was played, maybe when you guys were coming up through the game and growing up in the game. And it's a good question to ask you too, Joe, because, you know, are there things that you notice in the game today that, and it doesn't have to be negative things, but it can be if you want, but are there things that you notice specifically that are very different from when you were playing in the bigs?
Well, I think that's what makes it interesting. I think baseball is kind of an ever-evolving game, right?
100%.
We talk about, you know, we used to, you know, if we would hit guys on purpose and guys take out guys at, you know, at home, like at a certain point you couldn't run over guys anymore or go into second hard.
Right.
If you look 10 to 20 years before us, they thought we were soft. Look, 10 to 20 years before them, they thought they were soft. So it's like just kind of you see some of those clips of what the 70s, they were going in like linebackers taking the second.
They were tackling people.
They didn't fly at all. So it's kind of an ever-evolving game, right? And take it for what it is. And when you're playing, you try to grow with it because we got done about the same time, right, girls? I was 17. You weren't the same?
I'm 17.
Yeah, that's when that kind of, you know, the evolution of the kind of analytics started, right? Right in our last like couple years, especially 16 I was with the Dodgers and they were kind of big on it. Yeah. Yeah, so there was that starting to come into play, and you had to evolve with it, or especially the case I was in. You know, you're year to year, team to team. At that point, you evolve with it, or pack your bags and head to the house.
Yeah, the two things I think that were coming into play what I was getting frustrated with was they were timing us from the bullpen when I was in the bullpen, 30 seconds. You had 30 seconds, so now there's a different clock. They're timing you on this. that and the instant replay, I was like, oh my God, they're stopping the game for this long. Like, I don't want to get out of rhythm and sync, like, because, it's rhythm and timing, and it could be a good thing and a bad thing, but I was going bananas a little bit towards that. I'm like, what's going on with the game? You changed it. You changed it.
Yeah.
Like when they changed Trick Cereal or Honeycomb. I was pissed. Like we don't like change. I think
I mean, can you remember when they first started shifting, and you're like, and you give up a hit to a lefty where the shortstop was? You're like, what? Why are you not
What
there?
are you doing?
Why are you up the middle? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And then years later, everybody's doing it, and now they kind of can't.
Yeah.
And it's
it's funny because you make a good point, and it's funny that like the way that because I can even remember just when I think it was Joe Madden and the Rays when they first started shifting, but there is a reason for it. It does work most of the time, but it is funny that you notice those times where it's like, what the hell? What are we doing here? Why is this guy why is the shortstop playing in behind second base with but you kind of were just touching on it, and I apologize for interrupting, but I want is that a conversation that you ever had with a manager or maybe another coach when that was first starting to come into play? Or was that something that they brought to you and they were like, hey, this is how we're doing it now. We think that this works. This is what the data says. Or was it kind of, they're like, hey, what do you think about this? Was it a conversation, or was it more of like, or did that depend on the team?
I think it depended on the team, right? I think if you were like a veteran, I'm trying to remember what team it was, and it would happen. I don't know if it was so much with me. I can't remember the exact example, but I remember it was like a shortstop, and he went to the starting pitcher and was like, hey, this is where they want me to play this guy. And it was kind of like that shift, and they went to the starting pitcher, and the pitcher was like, oh, no, I want you to play him over here. He kind of like trumped it. But then I'm sure there was other teams, like you said, like the Rays. So what? Like, you're a rookie pitcher. You don't have that say. Right. Veteran guy would. And then it just slowly transitioned into this is the way it's going to be, and here's the numbers that back it. And you're, as a pitcher, I mean, you're like, hey, do you want this guy to hit, if you're going to face him X number of times, would you rather him be possibility hitting 290 or 220? Right. And you're like, well, I'll take 220. Well, then they're going to play over here.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I mean, speaking of, the batting average and everything like that, and you talked about baseball through the years and how the game has changed, but I think there are certain players who have kind of stuck through that no matter what era they play in. And obviously, when you first came up, your first few years, early 2000s in the AL West, the Bay Area series with the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants, did you face Barry Bonds, and what was that experience like?
Well, I did face Bonds. I faced Bonds the day after he passed Ruth.
Oh.
So he got 7-16.
Wow.
So I kind of like, I felt bad for my teammate, but took a little nice little breath out, like, oh, that's not me.
You're not a career highlight for somebody else, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. The wrong end of a highlight. Right. I remember throwing him a pitch, and I think I threw him like a changeup, and he had been obviously, even Bonds, one of the best hitters ever to play the game. Right? He was trying to hit home runs because he was trying to pass that. It hits everybody. You're right. If you're a pitcher and you're trying to hit that milestone of a number that may be a strikeout. Sure. You're kind of you start going for that strikeout instead of just letting the game play. But that leads into how I was pitching him, and all of a sudden he like drives like a ball to left center or whatever it was, like single, double. I can't remember. And I kind of remember sitting there like he hadn't hit that pitch all week, and I was watching some of the video. And I go in, Jason Kendall's my catcher, and I say something to him. He's like, oh, he stopped hitting homers. He's just getting hits now. And I was like, oh, well,
makes sense.
That'd have been nice to know before the game.
I love that. I mean, I'm sure we could talk for another half hour, but you have been more than generous with your time here on our episode here, episode 41. I couldn't think of a better way to end off there than with that story. But Grilli, anything else before we?
Yeah, I mean, dude, one of the 50th greatest, most interesting.
That's right.
Most interesting.
I love it, dude. No, seriously, you are, and kudos to you because I'm doing the stuff on NIL. I just wrote my second book here talking about, because like you, I wanted to help transition. It's very difficult, and nobody shows up, right? Nobody's there to go, oh, here, I don't care how much money you make. It's like, that's why a lot of guys go broke, or they get bored, or they get trapped into this, I don't know who I am or what to do kind of lifestyle, and they're bored, depressed, and this and that. But it's the transition that's hard. It's not that, I would love to be a player, right? But it's cool that
I would
gravitated to wine, man.
absolutely with what you just said, and the kind of falling. I think we've kind of hit that period. You're like 6 years down the road after done playing, and you kind of realize that now that transition's hard. And the weird that gets, you think of it in the how long you live and how short that your career is in that, but it's such a huge part of what everybody knows you for and kind of what you are. Because essentially that's what you are, and you're trying to figure out this transition of like, what do I do now? Like, well, who am I? I can't do that anymore.
Yep.
Like,
don't you think too?
30. I was 37, I think, when I was done. I was like, wait, what? Like, I had this, man. But it was still like a part of you is missing, and that and that goes away. And I actually had it hit more not long ago. Philly had me come through out of first pitch, and that's the first time I kind of been back on a big league field in front of a crowd. And, throwing out the first, that adrenaline shot I was like, I walked off and I was like, oh my God, I missed that.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody, I was like, you know what? I would trade all 13 years I played for one day to be able to do it again, like in my peak. Yeah. And they were like, really? I was like, absolutely.
No, there's nothing like that adrenaline rush.
No question.
It's not even just, though, people sometimes, again, think it's just as an athlete. You take guys that are veterans of war and stuff like that. They want to go back in. Police officers, firefighters. When you do something passionately, or you're that driven towards something. Heck, I know a guy just retired from his industry, and he's not even 3 months out of it. He's like, I shouldn't have retired. It's because he doesn't know what to do yet. So this guy's 60 some odd years old. So it's not just athletes, but I think people find it. I think there's even I just started watching it. It's called Afterlife on Prime Video, right? It just told us about 12 NFL guys and what they did. And I think more and more of that's got to be spoken of, because everybody looks at like, oh, you hit the lottery, or oh, your life is so easy and you have no problems, which is not the case. There's probably that many more, right? More money, more problems, this, that, the other.
Yeah.
But we all have them. We're not any better than. We just did things a little differently. We chose a crazy dream job to have, and you're in your second one. You're in your second phase of an awesome life, and you have a great family and beautiful wine, man, to try. So tell everybody where they can try your wine, find your wine, and if they're in Napa Valley, your phone number, so they're calling you to hang out with them.
Just hit up the email. If you don't have my number, we didn't play with each other, hit up an email. I'll answer it back. I'll set you up.
Nice, man.
Awesome.
Well, I hope we get out there again, Blant. Thanks for coming on short notice. Great.
I enjoyed it,
man. I know it's not the one you and I want to be on, but this is how we jam now, dude. And
it is.
It's good. So cheers to you, man. Good luck with everything.
Cheers.
And if you come out Pittsburgh, dude, come to Pittsburgh too. We got wine here too, bro.
I will. That's how I do it now. Hit the road.
That's right.
Boom. Right. I love it. Well, everybody, thank you for our listeners for tuning in too. And you could find the podcast if you want more on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find that. You could watch the episode, see all our funny faces on YouTube, and you can hit us up on social media at Mound Visit Pod. Joe, again, thank you so much for taking the time to come on Mound Visit.
Steelers case.
No, thank you. Steelers, I really enjoyed it. This was awesome.
Steelers case. Steelers.
Yeah, go Bills. Go Bills. How about that, Grilli? Oh, Joe, who's your football team before we let you go?
I mean, I grew up in Kentucky, so it was Kentucky basketball.
Okay, that's fair.
Which I think they're 6th right now. Mm-hmm. And everything else was just kind of blurred. But the Titans came in when I was like at the end of high school, which that's a little bit late in the game, and then just travel around. And you eventually, I've been out here for 6 years, and it's the Niners are the closest one. But it just, I don't know, just doesn't resonate quite the same.
Yeah.
I guess.
I get it.
Not growing up here.
You cheered for the city you played in as a player. How many jerseys you wear?
Exactly. 7.
Yeah. So you got 7 NFL teams.
That's cheating.
Right,
That's cheating.
Same one. That's what people always ask me. Like, playoff time comes, they're like, "Oh, who are you rooting for?" And I'm like, "Nobody." And they're like, "Wait, what do you mean?" And I'm like, "Well, if you want me to look, I'll find who my best buddy is that's still playing, and I'll root for that team." I was like, "I root for players, not teams." I was like, "Once they start paying me again, then I'll root for them."
That's right, man.